The RV Show USA is brought to you by Flagstaff, building better RVs, making smarter RVers.
And a big old Wingman shout out to our friends listening to Chicago's 560 The Answer. Thank you all for riding along with us. Speaking of riding along, that's what we're going to be talking about with the author of a great new book. His name is Rich Ratay, and he has recently released a book, get this, Don't Pull Me Over. What a great book title, Rich.
Don't make me pull over.
I'm not so sure about young people today, but those of us who grew up back, I guess the baby boomers and people that are a little bit younger like you probably heard "Don't make me pull over" a lot.
Oh, absolutely, and you know, we learned from our parents well too, because I know I've used that phrase more than a few times with my own kids on our own family road trips, in more recent times.
You know, literally, when I saw the title of your book, I said, I got to get that. It's a terrific title. What inspired you to write Don't Make Me Pull Over?
Well, I know this is going to shock you, Alan, but the idea for writing a book about family vacations and family road trips actually occurred to me while on a family vacation. I was on a vacation with my own wife and kids, and I looked over at my kids, and it just got me back to thinking about all the times that I traveled with my own brothers and sisters and parents during the 1970s and 80s. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and we traveled all over the country, mainly due south. My dad was an avid golfer, so the point of most of our road trips was to get my dad out of the cold Wisconsin winter and down to a warm and sunny golf course as fast as humanly possible. But, you know, it also started me thinking how important those road trips really were. I mean, just traveling, you know, as a young kid, as say, you know, 5 and 10-year-old, it just broadened my horizons in so many ways to be able to see these different areas of the country where people lived in such different ways than we did in our home in suburban Milwaukee here in Wisconsin. And just being exposed to, you know, different foods and the different dialects of the country. And then I think what was most important about those road trips was just the long hours that I spent together in the car with my siblings and my parents. I think it really bonded us for a lifetime. I have 2 older brothers and an older sister, and we're very different people. But I look back, and it was really those long hours that we spent together, you know, seeing attractions and going to different destinations and bickering and fighting along the way that really bonded us for a lifetime. And so when I got back from that family vacation, I decided to hit the library and find out how this great American road trip experience came to be. And I just found so many different interesting stories and information that I just knew I had to write a book.
And that's what surprised me. You know, I was expecting sort of a book like an Irma Bombeck type of, you know, funny, and there's some funny stuff in it, but it's incredibly interesting, the history. And I mean, you must have done an awful lot of background and research on, and kind of give an overview, if you would, on the book, because it really is, I find it just fascinating.
Yeah, the book itself is what I call a pop history memoir. And when I originally set out to write the book, you know, like I said, we did a tremendous amount of travel during the 1970s. We'd take generally 2 long vacations a year. And, of course, I had all these great stories and anecdotes from our own experiences. And so I thought the book was going to be about, you know, 80% of those family stories. And then I would just flesh it out with a little bit of history, you know, illuminating people on how that road trip experience came to be. But as I got more and more into the history and learned about how all these, you know, the great roadside chains and the devices we had in our cars, like cruise control and radar detectors, remember those old fuzz busters, and the 8-track tape decks that we had in our cars, you know, learning how all those things came to be and really shaped the American experience, that equation kind of flipped. And so it became a little bit more about the history. I used our family stories as kind of a springboard to get into the history of how that great American road trip experience came to be. And then, of course, I also folded in, you know, a bunch of pop culture that really kind of helps readers. I think it puts them back in that time and in that era to give them a sense of what traveling the highways of America in the 1960s and 70s and 80s was really like.
But even before that, Americans have always had a love affair with cars and traveling, but road trips were not always easy, as I have understood in your book.
No.
I mean, way back in the day, road trips were a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the first successful attempt to cross America by car, it really began, as many bad ideas do, on a bet after a few cocktails one night. The year, it was 1903, and there was a young doctor by the name of Horatio Jackson who was out on his honeymoon. He and his wife lived in Vermont, but they went out to the west coast of the San Francisco area for their honeymoon. And Jackson, he was kind of an outgoing guy, and he made some friends. One night he decided to go out with a friend and have some drinks at San Francisco's University Club. And soon he finds himself embroiled in a rather heated debate with another patron of the establishment about whether these newfangled contraptions called automobiles are really the future of transportation or just a passing fad. And Jackson, despite the fact that he didn't own a car, and it's likely that he'd never driven one, for some reason he argues strenuously that no, cars are the future of American transportation. In fact, he stands up and he boldly declares that why automobiles are already so rugged and reliable, why I could drive one, this day back to my home in Vermont across the country. Well, this is 1903.
Yeah.
There's not even roads basically west of the Mississippi River, especially outside of cities. So this is a rather bold proclamation, as you can
especially
surmise.
when you're on your honeymoon.
Yes, exactly. And so, of course, he's immediately challenged on this little assertion of his, and the two gentlemen set a bet of $50. It wasn't a great sum of money. It's about $1,500 in today's money, and Jackson was a wealthy guy. So that wasn't a big deal, but probably what was a big deal was him having to go home and explain to his new bride, the next day about this bet that he had made. And, he was a man of his word, so he was going to follow through on it. Jackson's wife was a smart woman. She immediately booked passage on a train back to their home in Vermont. And she said, you know what, Horatio, you write me along the way, which to Horatio's credit, he actually did. But Horatio wasn't a dumb guy himself. He hired a crack mechanic by the name of Sewell Crocker, and on Crocker's recommendation, he went out and bought himself a 20-horsepower Winton touring car, which was a quality, rugged automobile for the adventure. And there had been previous attempts to cross America by car. They'd all failed because they're of trying to get across the Rocky Mountains. So one of Horatio's smart ideas was to travel immediately north along the West Coast and follow the route of the Oregon Trail, and that's how he would proceed east. Well, so they bought this car, and they loaded it up with all sorts of camping equipment and guns and this device called a block and tackle that they could use to extricate themselves from
when
mud,
they got stuck.
should they become stuck in the mud somewhere. And so they set off, and they're heading north. And, of course, in the first 15 miles, they get a flat tire, which requires them to use their only spare that they have.
In 15
and, they proceed to flat again in another few miles, and that requires them to wind thick, like ship rope around the rim of the car so that they can just proceed to the next town where they can order a new tire. They run out of gas. They get bad directions. One woman sends them 100 miles out of the way just so that she could have some of her extended family members get their first look at an actual automobile.
Hey, Rich, hang on. We got to pull over and take a break. You can stick with us for another segment, right?
Sounds good.
All right,
absolutely.
good. He is the author of Don't Make Me Pull Over, Rich Ratay. And after the break, we're going to talk about all kinds of things, including the family station wagon. Remember those things, those big old station wagons? And what the deal was with all that big old fake wood paneling. We'll also talk about how early RVers kind of paved the way for today's nomads right here on the RV Show USA.
RV Show USA. Start living the RV dream today.
All right, when I saw the title of this book, it's called Don't Make Me Pull Over. I just had to grab it. On the phone with us is Rich Ratay. He's the author of this great book. He's telling us about the first coast-to-coast, east-to-west road trip that when there really weren't really roads. So where you left off is it was a struggle, but I guess Horatio Jackson finally made it all the way from San Francisco to Vermont.
He did, and you know, the key may have been that they picked up a stray pit bull by the name of Bud, and he seems to change the luck of the group. So they're traveling across the arid salt flats of Utah, and they notice that this is really irritating poor Bud's eyes. You know, he's getting all teared up, and so they have him outfitted for his own pair of driving goggles. And the press just starts to fall in love with this. So at every town and city that they cruise through, the press turns out. They're taking pictures of Bud, and they're telling the story of Jackson and his expedition across America. And so gradually, this trio are becoming celebrities even before they get across the Mississippi River. Once they do get across the Mississippi, there actually are some roads built, and so the going gets a little bit easier. And just a mere 63 short days after they left San Francisco, they roll into New York City's Times Square to basically a ticker-type parade type of greeting in New York City, and they are celebrities having become the first trio to cross America by car.
And your book, you start out, with that story, but then you talk about how the first, dare I say it, the first woman actually drove from coast to coast. Who'd have thunk it? But all the way through how the highway systems were developed, and it is so interesting, the theme parks and the eras and how the families got involved, and airplane travel. I did not know that until the mid-'70s, only you said in the book, 25% of Americans had been on an airplane in 75?
Prior to 1975, 4 in 5 Americans had never traveled by airplane. So, you're absolutely right, Alan. All these things that we take for granted today, from the interstate system to fast food restaurants and drive-through windows, all the devices that we now have in our cars, once upon a time, those things didn't exist, and all of these things had very interesting origin stories, which I tried to capture in my book.
I think, tell me a little bit about the history of the station wagon, the big family station wagon that now I guess turned into minivans, and the wood paneling that was just everywhere.
Yeah, right. I think during the 1970s, it was almost mandatory for all families to own a Ford Country Squire station wagon with that fake wood paneling on the sides, right? The origins of station wagons are actually hinted at in their name, station wagons. They were wagons used around stations, train stations, because at the turn of the century of the 1800s going into the 1900s, of course, trains were still the dominant form of long-distance transportation. But what was still needed was a way to get train passengers from their homes to the train stations. And so when these early automobiles came out, people instantly recognized that the vehicles would be very good for that purpose. Unfortunately, the early cars, like the Model Ts, were really only made to carry passengers and not cargo, and certainly not those long travel trunks that people wanted to bring, on their train trips. Mm-hmm. And so handymen would buy up these Model Ts, and they would hack off the metal bodies of the car, basically right at the windshield back, and they would recreate the entire body in wood so that it would accommodate passengers in a back seat. Of course, you would have the driver up front, and then a long cargo area to accommodate these travel trunks that the train passengers wanted to bring with them. Over time, passengers started realizing the practical applications of these vehicles, and consumers wanted to buy these types of vehicles for themselves. Station wagons became extremely popular even prior to World War II. And then during World War II, all the car companies making tanks and planes had honed their production techniques to work with steel in new and innovative ways. And so after World War II, they were actually able to create the bodies of station wagons entirely of steel, but they would put the fake wood paneling on the sides of course, as kind of an homage, a remembrance to the origins of station wagons. And that's why they put fake wood paneling on the side of the station wagon, sometimes in models even today in minivans and SUVs.
Don't make me pull over. I heard it on every road trip multiple times. It was like the warning signal from Dad in the front seat. That was the last warning before he pulled over. He tried to backhand one of us kids in the back. But,
Absolutely.
You had talked about how magical, and I think road trips really, they were and they still can be magical. There's so many great things to see in our country, and the road is the best way to see it by, RVing and driving in a car, especially in an RV nowadays.
Absolutely. When you're flying over the country to get to that final destination, then your trip becomes all about just that final destination, and you miss the experience of that, that shared time together in the car, discovering all the interesting things that there are to see and discover along the way in these different towns and different states. And it's really the way, as of course your audience knows, driving RVs, it's only by driving through the country that you're able to really get a taste for all the different areas of the country.
And I think that people are yearning for that more now. They're yearning that, and if you have to look at a bright side with this COVID situation, people are getting back to basics, and they want to see our country. And it's a beautiful place and so varied in geography and the people and the food. It's all of it, and it's all covered in your great book.
Absolutely, yeah. Even prior to the pandemic, millennials were starting to come back to road trips, mostly because of all the headaches associated with air travel these days. It's not even all that cheap anymore to buy airfares for, a whole family. Mm-hmm. And then you throw in all the headaches like having to wait in the security lines and get parking for your car and all the expenses associated with that. Millennials were starting to realize that, hey, if I take my own car, then I'm in charge of my own trip. I can leave and travel as long as I want to on any given day. And so even before this whole COVID thing happened, millennials in particular were starting to rediscover the practical advantages of the road trip. But it's my hope that they also discover the charm and the benefit and just all the good things there are to enjoy and just spending that time together with the other members of your family, really spending that quality time with your kids and with your spouse. Those are the times that you really look back on and treasure.
It can be magical. Listen, in about 20 seconds or so, Rich, what's the big takeaway you want people to, when they put down, they finish, don't make me pull over. What do you want them to go away with?
Yeah, I think the real theme of the book is that the journey is, in a way, very much the destination. Again, what you're really going to remember, I never mention any of the destinations, really, that we go to, that my family went to in the book. It was all about those long hours together, discovering all the sights and areas of the country together, and just enjoying each other's company. That's really what road trips are all about.
All right, so where can we get this great book? And then I need to wrap it up real quickly. So how can we find this book?
Sure. Yeah, well, you can find it on Amazon, and most independent bookstores carry it as well. Of course, it's always good to get out and support those small local businesses, especially in a time like this.
All right, Rich Ratay, thank you so much. Don't make me pull over. I love it, and hopefully we can talk again. You're a great interview.
Thank you so much, Alan. Really appreciate you having me on.
All right, likewise. It's called Don't Make Me Pull Over, folks. A very nice read, and I'm telling you, it would make for a terrific gift for somebody, hint, hint. You know what, growing up in 2020 is not the same as it was growing back up in the 60s, 70s, even 80s. I think there's still a lot of magic to be found when you travel in our great country. I do have a little suggestion, I think, that I'd like to run past you. If you and your family can do it, when you hit the road, do a little bit of, digital detox. Make it a game. Turn off your cell phone if you can. Turn off the electronics. Anything with a screen, turn it off. Slow down a little bit. Take your time. Look out the window. Look at the other cars. Make up your own games. Talk with each other. Just talk. Listen. Listen to each other, maybe. Maybe that's even more important. If you see some kind of historical marker, take a few minutes and pull over. Check it out. There's so much to see, so much to learn. Remember, you know, if you don't look, you can't see. You can always turn your phone back on when you get to your destination, but in the meantime, enjoy the scenery and let her soak in. Don't Make Me Pull Over. What a great book. Thanks for riding along with us today, folks. We'd love to hear what you think of the show, and I know our great station affiliates would as well. You can leave us a voicemail up to 3 minutes long at 1-330-WINGMAN. We listen to every single call. Again, 1-330-WINGMAN. Until next time, I'm Alan Warren. I am the RV Wingman. Be safe, have fun, play nice, and don't make me pull over.
Helping you to learn so you won't get burned. He's back on